he's addressing what might seem to be a bewildering array of topics. I mean, he's getting quoted on certainly his critique of global capitalism, concern for immigrants, interreligious dialogue, global warming, evangelism, clericalism, God's mercy, even walls versus bridges. He's all over the map. Now, I might ask, well, why is he doing all of this? It was easier to kind of focus, the Pope John Paul had a real strong emphasis on human rights, particularly against the Soviet Union. Benedict had an emphasis on Orthodox doctrine, keeping our beliefs clear. Why is Francis doing all of this? Maybe he's not so young anymore. He's trying to get as much done as he can before he dies, cover everything. But I actually want to suggest here that there's a coherent vision. There's the underlying unity behind all of these different things he's talking about. So I'm going to try to suggest that image to focus our discussion of specific aspects of the theology of the poor. Pope Francis has argued that society must make an option for the poor. This isn't limited to a religious choice. That the church must make an option for the poor, and that each individual person, each individual Christian to be Christian, must make a personal option for the poor. And I think here's where we see that this isn't just the usual option for the poor. It is that, but it comes under the choice between the standard of Christ or the standard of Lucifer. When, for example, in talking about society making an option for the poor, he argues that justice is so integral to society and mutual care of one another is the basis of civilization. So that if we don't care for each other, if we don't establish justice for the poor as a society, our society will end up not only being empty and meaningless, but in fact destroying itself. Mutual care is the basis of civilization. When you stop caring for one another, civilization frays and society breaks down. So again, following through the two standards thing, knowing that the standard of securing yourself first leads to destruction, he argues that a church without an active option for the poor, no matter how much they talk about it, no matter how many, he actually says this, no matter how many forums you have on social justice, if you're not out there doing something, the church is going to break down, it's going to spiritually die, it's going to lose itself in empty talk, because that's where the standard of Lucifer leads. The personal option for the poor, I think, is one of the real signature contributions that Francis has made, if anybody listens to it, because he's declared that no one is too busy to be personally involved with the poor. All should be actively committed. Sorry about that. The usual reaction is like, really? Even if our hearts are in the right place, right? I mean, can't I do my work? I teach. Can't I just teach and let that trickle down? He's saying no. I mean, think about it. There's no outsourcing your option for the poor. We can't get other people to do it for us, which is kind of a drag, right? Because it's easier to outsource that one. And then you think about, well, a lot of people say, but look, I do important work. I'm busy. I don't have time to make sandwiches for the soup kitchen. But I think Francis is asking us to really think about that. Would we be Christians and say we couldn't find an hour to pray, go to church at least occasionally? Can we be Christians then if we can't find the time to reach out to excluded people? An hour a week, an hour a month, something that brings us into contact with real people who are suffering from their lack of contact. Okay, I'm going to move now to the what starts to get more really pointed when he talks about the idolatry of global capitalism. Now, a lot of people will note he's made sharp criticisms. Trickle-down theory of economics doesn't work. There's no evidence to support it. The economy is unjust and destructive. He's also gotten sharp pushback from people who say he's gone too far. Many people have pointed out, most of what he's saying, that's not all that new. Benedict criticized capitalism. John Paul II criticized capitalism. We have over 100 years of Catholic social teaching. He's in a long line of criticizing unjust economies. But I think he pushes the criticism a little further in a couple of respects. One is he's noticed that our new global economy doesn't just oppress the worker, it often has no need for people. They've gone from being oppressed to excluded. There's no people that exceed what the economy needs to function, therefore become valueless. We see this on a global level, and we see it kind of locally with our homeless. The people without economic value. They're not just working hard to survive, they have no place in society. We've put achieving profits over life. And another theme he's picked up from Father Gustavo Gutierrez in Liberation Theology, you see it also in Francis's writings, the economy of exclusion kills. Or as Gustavo Gutierrez wrote, in the final analysis, poverty means death. If you're poor, you don't have enough. You don't have the means you need to survive. The poor die before their time. And our economy of exclusion kills spirits as well as bodies. People who are denied a place in society and the spirits of the people who deny them, as some of your prayers so nicely pointed out. He's going to go even a little further when he calls it idolatrous. Although again, this fits the logic, because if you're following the standard of Lucifer, you followed another god, another set of values. So he's saying we don't just have an unjust economy, we've made a false god of our economy. Couple of examples that he points out. It's often the highest unquestioned common value in our society. We don't even debate whether we want economic progress. We assume that the question is how to get there, how to get a growing economy at all costs. It's often the highest value in our own lives as we live them. Again, I'm kind of reminded of Martin Luther, who said, "Show me how you live and I will tell you who your God is." What do we spend our time on? Who dares to be an economic failure? Right? That's scary. This economy demands, like all false gods, sacrifices. The sacrifices of the lives of the left out, of the poor, of the common good, of our own time, energy, and family relationships, all sacrificed to appease the god of economic profit and success. So we have no time for those things that aren't profitable, like prayer, like church, like caring for people in need. And like all false gods, it takes away our freedom. The true God enlivens, gives us back our true selves. The false God, the standard of Lucifer, enchains us, makes us unfree. Also, this is part, of course, of the option for the poor. Migrants are among the most vulnerable of the poor. They've lost their homes, they've lost their communities, many lose family in the process. They have lost resources, nearly all their possessions. These are often the face of the disposable poor, the people who don't have enough economic value to matter. The migrants and refugees left in these camps are the disposable people, the ones who have no place in society. And he notes, an interesting system we have. Capital can cross borders, profit can cross borders, natural resources can cross borders in this global system, but those who are left disposable can't cross borders. So he calls on the states, again, to balance their concern for the rights of citizens with their obligation to people beyond their borders, because mutual care is the basis of civilization. A self-enclosed society will not be secure, but will self-destruct because it's following empty values. Of course, he calls us to act to end global warming, stop the destruction of nature, loss of species. He reminds us of the moral imperative to not use up what other people need. Right? So water is a right. It's necessary for life. We have no right to waste what other people need to live. But he's taking the argument beyond human well-being, although that is there. We should care for the environment because the poor suffer from the destruction of the environment because we're using up the resources for the future. It's not good for us. But he also has said nature has value in itself. He warns us of a tyrannical anthropocentrism.
Tyrannical what?
Anthropocentrism, putting human beings first above nature. This is unusual, I think. And his argument for it is that nature has intrinsic value not just for human purposes. It's created by God, who called it good. We all know that from Genesis. And nature praises God in its diversity. We have no right to drive species into extinction. What? As stark as the option is between these two standards, we fail, right? We choose the wrong standard over and over. We do it as a society. We do it as churches. We do it in our personal lives. We try to have it both ways. That's what we really do, right? We don't go all the way, but we'll do mostly care for wealth and success, and then we'll do the other as well. Of course, that doesn't work. We can't seek wealth and status and then come back to the standard of Christ at the same time. It's one or the other, ultimately, putting the community, the whole, first and finding ourselves in love, or putting ourselves first and finding we've lost ourselves and our community. We are continually called back in our failures, in our efforts at the both and, by a merciful God who will always forgive, always empower us to start again. And this is the year of mercy for a people facing some stark choices between a world following the standard of Lucifer and a world following the standard of Christ.